Hello, everyone. I am Carla Jakubovic, hostess of the Swiss Learning Podcast, and thanks for listening. Swiss Learning represents 13 prestigious schools in Switzerland, and they're experts at finding the right fit for each student. On this podcast, we will showcase alumni from each one of these schools to share their success stories and insights with you. Today, our podcast welcomes Antonio D'Adalto Neto, an alumnus from Brillantmont. Antonio will share with us his experience living and studying in Switzerland. Antonio, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. And thanks to you and Swiss Learning for having me here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Antonio, you were born in Brazil. So how did the idea of studying in Switzerland come about?
I was born in Brazil, and actually the school I studied in Brazil, they had mistress children, had been to Brillantmont. So what happened was we received often representatives from BM at the school. And I think I attended a couple of those presentations. And I think very quickly, me and my father, we realized that, there's a really good fit. He wanted me to do what I wanted to do, which was leave the country, go elsewhere, explore, but go somewhere safe as well. So for him, he was a big supporter. I liked the fact that the school proposed the British curriculum, which was something I wanted. Mm-hmm. So that's how it happened.
Antonio, you actually spent 3 years at Brillantmont. What was the most important things you learned there?
I think I did go there because I wanted to study and get somewhere in terms of education, further education. But I think most importantly, it was independence. I went there when I was 15. Mm-hmm. That's quite young. But I think boarding school really teaches you how to do things by yourself and, become an independent person, not someone who, has to make the choices. I think that's really the big one, apart from the education.
Mm-hmm, certainly. And Brillantmont is known for being a very familiar school. How quickly did you begin to feel at home?
The thing is, when I arrived at Brillantmont, I came in at halfway through the school year, actually, mm-hmm. because of the differences between the Brazilian school year and the normal Northern Hemisphere school year. So that first half, that first, when I came in Jan, it was a bit difficult to, everyone had already their group of friends and everything. But for me, it was really when my second school year in Brillantmont started that, it was a fresh page and I was already there. So I had my, connections already. And then, of course, I got more engaged with the teachers I had classes with. And from the start of my second year, Did
you have roommates from other nationalities?
So that's a good point. My first year I did, and I shared a room with a colleague from Japan. And but after that, actually, I was one of the few people that got a single room. I had my single room, but still, I wasn't living in a floor with loads of guys around me. So yes, it was almost like sharing a room, mm-hmm. but I had my single room for a very long time. Yeah.
How about other languages? Did you get to learn any new languages during your time in school?
I would say, I learned about expressions and everything, but I definitely expanded on the ones I had already started learning in Brazil. So, especially me, now I live in the UK, and here it's not normal to know many languages as it is in Switzerland. So in Brazil, in my school, there was this big effort by the school to, open doors to other languages. So I had studied Italian, Spanish, English from a very early age, of course, and French. But in Switzerland, obviously, that I expanded my studies and got to a very proficient level in practically almost all of those languages. But I have to say, I have lost quite a bit of it since I've been here in the UK, mm-hmm. unfortunately.
And what was your routine like at Brillantmont? Could you walk us through a typical day at the school?
So typical day. So start in the morning, we go for breakfast, and then, class start. When I got there, I started my IGCSEs, but that was only for, half a year. I'd talk more about the time when I was in ALevels, AS and A2. That's in the British curriculum where you really choose where to focus. And I think there is, I think you have to be a lot more strict as to what do you really want. Do you really want to focus? Do you really want to spend the time in that? Because it's tough. It's you have to kind of exercise this discipline, right? So I took on quite a few subjects. Did 5 A-levels, which is quite a bit. No, 3. So yeah, I had a quite busy schedule. But on top of that, of course, we had sports class. Normally, 3 meals. So that's always the time where you get to talk to people, the social, which is very important. And at the end of the day, again, in-house, you're living with your mates and get the time to socialize. So it was pretty much that. I have to say, it was a very busy time for me in terms of studying, but there was quite a bit of time for socializing as well. Yeah.
And how about weekends? What sort of activities did you do on weekends?
I would say that it changed quite a bit during the year. So during summer, we would enjoy quite a bit of Lausanne. So we'd go to the port, Ushi, and get a boat and kind of explore the city.
Take advantage of the perfect location of the school, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But even traveling around this, Brillantmont also organized some school trips. So we'd go sometimes to France, Italy. We go a few times to Germany as well, to Europa Park, which is an amusement park, which is very good. But also during winter, which I loved, was skiing. So we had the possibility of going skiing quite a few times. And when I got to Brillantmont, I didn't know how to ski at all. I had lived in Brazil my whole life and was completely scared of going skiing. And I'll always remember it was Mrs. McLean, who basically I arrived there. I was very young, and they were telling me, you have to come because you're quite young. You can't stay alone at the school for the ski trip. So I went, and I said, I don't know how to ski. I'm Brazilian. And then I got there, and it was a complete disaster the first day. But then they really kind of pushed me to go for it, and it became a passion. I love it. Absolutely love skiing. And then, my senior year, my last year at Brillantmont, I would go every single weekend. Yeah.
That sounds like so much fun. And you also got the opportunity, as you mentioned, to explore other countries in Europe, Germany and Italy and France. So I think it's just such a rich cultural experience to be able, one of the advantage of studying in Switzerland, right? Because it's so easy to get around and visit the neighboring countries. Yep. Are you still in touch with any of your classmates from BM?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. My Brazilian friends, other friends from other places. I mean, now I live in Europe, so I'm in touch with, I have very close friends from Sweden, from Spain. These guys are with me,
You live with friends from all over the world, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. So, I can go around and go to Japan or go to wherever in Europe or even back home, Brazil is a big country, so you go to different cities, you meet people from BM. It's great. And even in London, actually, there's a huge community in London. I have to mention that loads of people came here.
That's nice. Antonio, could you tell us a funny story about your time at BM?
Yeah. So I was trying to think about this one, and I wanted to kind of do a twist on it because it's not necessarily funny, but I'm very fond of the memory. I remember when I would come back from Brazil. It's a very long trip. Many people actually do this, right? You have to go all the way home, and you don't want to kind of waste the opportunity because you're so long, far away from home. So I'd often come back late to school, a few days late, and they would tell me, "Oh, you can't do this," etc. But then I had this French teacher, Madame Baron. And she would always come, and when I arrived, and she would just, tell me off in a kiddenly manner, and she'd be like, "Antonio, you have to eat. You're too thin." And it was almost like, coming back home and you're talking to your family, and they say exactly the same thing. So I remember this every single time she would say this. So it's a very fond memory. It's not necessarily, it's funny, but it's something I really remember every time coming back and hearing Madame Baron saying exactly the same thing.
It's a sweet memory, and it sounds that it comes from a place for caring, right, about the students and your well-being and really treating the students like family. As you said, that was the same thing as you heard at home, you heard in school. So I think that tells a lot about how the school takes care of its students.
Yeah. No, it was very much like, second home, really.
And after graduating at Brillantmont, you went to City University of London to pursue a Bachelor of Science in Financial Economics. Was that amongst your top universities of choice?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what was really important about going to City was that it's not quite common for universities to give you the opportunity to do an industrial placement here in the UK. A few do, not many. And that's what I did. So while I was at City, I worked for 1 year at the Bank of England. That opened many, many doors. Even if I decided that that was not the career I wanted to pursue, regulation, it opened many, many doors. So yeah, it was the right thing for me, definitely.
And how helpful was the school in helping you apply to your universities of choice?
They were very, very helpful. Particularly, I wanted to mention Ms. Bowen, Geraldine Bowen, she used to work at Brillantmont. She's not there anymore. But when I was there, she was there, and she was phenomenal in helping me, explain to me all of the opportunities I had. How the system for applying to universities worked. And it's a structured system in the UK. It's a unified system. And she was explaining it all to me, all the requirements. She really was like a mentor. I was, like I mentioned before, I was taking quite a few extra classes because I wanted to do more ALevels. And she was advising me quite a bit during that time. So definitely very helpful.
That's nice to hear, because it makes all the difference having the right support and guidance, right? Antonio, what are some of the skills that boarding schools equip you with that come in handy as you enter the professional arena?
I definitely would come back to the independence point, and also I'd add another one, initiative. Because in boarding schools, you become an independent individual, and you have to. Choice is yours, and you have to make the best of it. And you have to make the choices, right? And having initiative is definitely someone that, obviously in the corporate world, but even if you're an independent professional, entrepreneur, etc., just in professional life, you have to have initiative. So I think that's very important. It helps a lot in many ways that people don't see. Necessarily, when you get someone who has been in a boarding school, they have that thing where they're making their choices and they're proposing projects. I've seen that
without even realizing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Antonio, during your time at Deutsche Bank, you were a student mentor and a community volunteer as part of the bank's corporate social responsibility program, and you also volunteered for charity work at Habitat for Humanity. Why is being kind so important to you?
It's I like people to be kind to me, of course. So if I can do the same, then that's just retribution. But it's I think it's something that's so much easier than not being kind. But apart from that, obviously, I recognize that around my family, my friends, my social circle. My industry, we're extremely privileged people, not only, to live in the countries where we live financially. So, I think being able to pay back is very important in any way we can. It doesn't have to be charity. It can be very simple, even at work, if you're kind to the people you're around. And I feel that kind of sense of responsibility of having to do a little bit, and it doesn't have to be much, like I mentioned. So,
I love that. Sometimes it's like you said, it's helping the colleague sitting next to you, right? You don't have to necessarily fly to Africa to be charitable, and you can do it in small, meaningful ways. I absolutely love that. Could you tell us a little bit about your current job at Citibank?
Yes. Yeah. So I moved to City in the end of February 2021, and I'm currently, recently promoted to AVP.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so we work investing the bank's excess cash, basically. We invest them in structured credit fixed income notes. What's really good about it is that, I mean, City is massive, right? So we are in the top three of the investor base in my niche market. So it gives me so much opportunity and exposure to the market I'm working with, which is CLOs. Yeah, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it since I joined. They've been a wonderful company for me. Yeah.
What advice could you offer students who are also interested in pursuing a career in finance?
Right. So I think what advice I'd give myself. I would say, even though I knew what I wanted to do, I think sometimes it's hard to know what you need to do. Yeah. So I would say if you're pursuing, and finance is quite general, but specifically if you're looking for something in, investment banking or sales and trading, M&A, etc., all that kind of stuff. The recruitment process is very extreme. It's extremely rigorous. I think it's very important is research and to know what you're applying for. Really have to know the company. Obviously you have to have a very strong background in finance. The bar is very high. You're expected to learn and know a lot by that. By the bachelor level. I think it's. I'm not going to say it's unfair, but it's a very strict process, and you're expected to know a lot. So a lot of research, knowing what the basic questions will be, but actually knowing about the company you're applying for, because often what happens is people apply to many, many, many companies, and that's normal. You have to, just because the odds are against you, really. But you really have to know about the job you're applying for. It's quite frustrating when you're recruiting someone and you know that they don't really know about the company and they don't really know what you're doing. And that just kills it. So I'd say research, know what you're applying for, and have very strong background knowledge in finance. Very, very strong.
That's a good tip. What are your professional goals and ambitions?
I think the best, I don't have a specific goal of saying, I want to be a CEO or I want to be a managing director. I think priority for me is to be recognized as, leading figure in what I do, or being recognized as an example. That's a goal. How that comes by or how that happens, I don't necessarily have a shape to it. But be a leading figure in my market. I think that's my primary goal. Of course, that can come with the financial reward that is normal with that, then that's perfect. But I think for me is being recognized as, the best, let's put it that way.
I like that goal. Antonio, what is your personal definition of success?
That's, I really like that question. I would say best defining word is happiness. It's very important. It is why I have made choices in my past about my career, and you have to do what you have to do. You have to do what you need to do to be happy, and that's in your professional life, in your family life, with your friends, in everything. If it's not working, if it's not making you happy, then there's no point. Even if that comes at financial sacrifice, doesn't really matter, because it's in the long term, it can't be sustainable. So that is my definition of success, being happy in what you do.
Antonio, and finally, I can't believe we're already here towards the end of the podcast. Are there any tips you could offer to students who are currently undecided about boarding schools?
I would say it's a big step, but I think it's very rewarding. There is a lot to learn, a lot to see, a lot to explore. Tips, I would say, just look at what's out there. Often when you decide to go to boarding school, you normally would have lived the same kind of life for quite some time. And so there's a lot to explore. So I would say keep an open mind, and yeah, just go for it.
I like that. Just go for it. Antonio, if any of our listeners wish to continue this conversation, can they find you on LinkedIn?
Yes, absolutely. So Antonio Neto, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can send me a message. I'm always glad to chat to people.
I truly appreciate that. I'm really thankful for having had you on the podcast today. Thank you so much. And if any of our listeners have any questions about anything else they heard on the podcast today, feel free to contact me at carla@swisslearning.com. Thank you, and until next time.